The night of the gala was electric. The air hummed with anticipation as the audience settled into their seats, the chandeliers glinting like stars above us. I stood backstage, watching Betty twirl in her glittering costume, every move a testament to our years of hard work and dedication. We were the golden couple of the dance scene, Betty and Andrew, the names on everyone's lips. But as I stood there, pride swelling in my chest, a gnawing sensation twisted in my gut. For weeks now, I'd felt a shift in our relationship. Like the ground beneath my feet was slowly eroding. Betty had been distant, lost in her rehearsals with Michael, the new choreographer. His presence loomed over us like a shadow, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. "Are you ready, Andrew?" Bet's voice cut through my thoughts, her bright smile failing to reach her eyes. She looked stunning, but I noticed the subtle flicker of anxiety beneath her confident exterior. "Of course, let's show them what we've got." I smiled back, but inside, doubt churned. My instincts screamed that this performance was more than just a dance. It was a facade, a mask we wore for the world. As the music began to play, we stepped onto the stage, the bright lights washing over us like a wave. I could hear the audience's cheers, but my heart was pounding for a different reason. Betty moved like a dream, but my mind was plagued with visions of her rehearsing with Michael, the way their laughter echoed in the studio, the way she seemed to light up in his presence. After the performance, I found myself lingering backstage, hoping to catch a moment alone with Betty. But my plans were interrupted by a group of dancers chatting excitedly about the upcoming gala and, inevitably, about Michael. "Did you see how he looked at her?" one of them whispered, laughter bubbling up. "It's like they're the perfect pair." Perfect pair. The words struck me like a punch to the gut. I felt the walls closing in as I pushed through the crowd, desperate to find Betty. Instead, I stumbled upon her bag, half hidden behind the curtain. A crumpled ticket caught my eye, a ticket to a private event, just for Michael's team. My heart sank. I confronted her that night, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "Betty, are you seeing him? What's going on?" She looked at me, eyes wide with surprise and denial. "Andrew, it's not what you think. Michael is just a choreographer. We're working together, that's all." But the doubt festered. I couldn't shake the images of their rehearsals. The intimacy I could feel from a distance. I needed to know the truth, but my heart wasn't ready to accept it. The weeks passed, and the tension between us only grew. I started planning my own way to confront this betrayal. If Betty wanted to dance with Michael, I would give her a stage she wouldn't forget. I'd orchestrate a grand performance that would lay bare the truth for everyone to see. As I choreographed the new dance, my heart hardened with resolve. I could feel the bitter satisfaction of revenge waiting at the end of this twisted journey. But deep down, a part of me mourned for what we had lost. The love that had once filled our partnership was being eclipsed by this dark plan. The night of the gala was drawing closer, and with each passing day, my anticipation grew. I wasn't just preparing to dance, I was ready to shatter the illusion and expose the reality of our fractured love. I knew it wouldn't bring me joy, but I needed closure, even if it meant breaking my own heart in the process. As the days rolled by, the anticipation of the gala transformed into a palpable tension that seemed to hang in the air. Betty and I practiced tirelessly, but with every turn and leap, I felt the distance between us growing. I was performing, but she was merely going through the motions, lost in thoughts that weren't mine. It was during one of those late-night rehearsals that I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. Hiding behind the curtain, I caught a glimpse of Betty and Michael discussing the choreography for the final act. Their laughter echoed through the studio, and the way Betty leaned in closer to him made my stomach churn. "Are you ready for tonight?" Michael asked, his voice low and teasing. "Absolutely," Betty replied, her smile brightening the dim room. "I can't wait to show everyone what we've been working on." The enthusiasm in her voice stung like a slap. My heart raced as I fought the urge to confront them. Instead, I retreated, my mind racing. This was my last chance to reclaim what was slipping through my fingers. With every day, I poured my energy into the choreography for the gala. It would be a spectacle, a showstopper that would highlight not just the dance but the raw emotion I felt boiling inside. I wanted the audience to see what was really happening between Betty and Michael, to expose their so-called creative partnership. As the night of the gala approached, I began to assemble the elements for my plan. I collected video footage, snippets of their rehearsals, the intimate glances, the moments that betrayed their connection. It was hard to watch, each clip digging a deeper wound in my heart. But I knew that this was necessary, I needed the truth to be seen. Betty noticed my increasing distance. The way I threw myself into my work, but she didn't question me. Perhaps she was too caught up in her own world with Michael to notice the storm brewing in mine. On the surface, we continued our rehearsals, smiles plastered on our faces for the audience. But behind closed doors, the tension was thick enough to cut. Finally, the night of the gala arrived. The theater buzzed with excitement, the audience filling every seat, eager for the performance that promised to be spectacular. Backstage, I paced, my heart racing with a mix of adrenaline and anxiety. "Are you ready, Andrew?" Betty asked, peeking into the dimly lit room. Her eyes sparkled with anticipation, blissfully unaware of the trap I had set for her. "Ready as I'll ever be," I replied, forcing a smile. Inside, my mind was a whirlwind of doubts and fears. Would this truly expose the truth, or would it destroy everything we had built together? As we stepped onto the stage, the lights blinded me momentarily. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the stakes. The audience's cheers echoed in my ears, but my focus was entirely on Betty. The music began, and we danced as we always had, graceful, synchronized, our bodies telling a story of love and partnership. But in my mind, the true narrative was far darker. Each step I took was a step toward revelation. The climax of our performance approached, and with it, the moment I had been waiting for. I glanced at the stage manager, who nodded subtly, signaling that it was time. My heart raced, knowing that the final act would reveal everything. As Betty and I spun into the final pose, the lights dimmed, and the video began to play. The audience gasped as the screen flickered to life, revealing the footage of Betty and Michael, laughter, stolen glances, and intimate moments captured behind the scenes. I watched as shock washed over Bet's face, her eyes widening in horror. The applause turned to whispers, then silence. The betrayal I had orchestrated lay bare before everyone, and I felt a sick sense of satisfaction mingling with the ache of my own heartbreak. In that moment, as the reality of our fractured relationship hung in the air, I realized that revenge would not bring me the closure I craved. Instead, it would forever alter the course of our lives. The silence in the theater was deafening, a heavy weight that pressed down on me as the video continued to play. Bet's face, a mix of shock and disbelief, mirrored my own inner turmoil. I had hoped for clarity, a moment of vindication, but all I felt was a crushing sense of loss. The audience's whispers swirled around us like a storm, and I could see the betrayal etched on their faces. I had wanted to expose the truth, but now it felt like I was the one being stripped bare. The applause that had once thundered now felt like a funeral dirge, echoing the death of our partnership. Bet's eyes darted from the screen to me, her expression shifting from shock to anger. I could see the gears turning in her mind, the realization of what I had done crashing over her like a tidal wave. "Andrew, what have you done?" she shouted, her voice breaking the oppressive silence. The raw hurt in her eyes cut deeper than any betrayal I had felt. "I did this for us," I shot back, my voice hoarse. "I couldn't stand by and watch you pretend everything was fine while you were dancing with him." "Pretend? You think I was pretending? This is our dream." Bet's voice trembled with emotion. "You just destroyed it." The confrontation escalated as the screen flickered, showing the final images of their rehearsals. I saw Michael in the background, smiling at Betty, his hand brushing against her shoulder. The intimacy of the moment was palpable, and it twisted the knife deeper into my heart. The applause that had erupted earlier now felt like ashes in my mouth. I turned to the audience, their shocked faces staring back at me. I had wanted them to see the truth, but now I felt exposed, vulnerable. I had set this stage for revenge, but it was my own heart that was breaking. "Let's go," Betty said, her voice steadying as she turned to leave the stage. I wanted to grab her, to pull her back, but the distance between us felt insurmountable. Instead, I stood there, paralyzed, watching her walk away from everything we had built together. Backstage, the chaos erupted. Dancers rushed around, some avoiding eye contact, others whispering among themselves. I could feel their judgment, their disappointment, and I hated myself for it. I had sacrificed our love for a moment of revenge, and it had blown up in my face. In the dressing room, I found Betty, her makeup streaked with tears. She sat on a bench, her shoulders shaking as she tried to regain her composure. I wanted to comfort her, to apologize, but the words stuck in my throat. I had crossed a line, and I didn't know how to take it back. Andrew, she said, looking up at me, her eyes red and puffy. Why would you do this? You could have talked to me. We could have worked things out. Talked? I echoed, frustration bubbling up again. You were with him. How could I trust you? I wasn't with him, Andrew. We were working on something we were passionate about. You know how much this means to me. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But I never meant to hurt you. I clenched my fists, the weight of my choices crashing down on me. I had acted out of anger, out of desperation, and it had cost me everything. Maybe I wanted you to see how it felt. To feel the pain of betrayal. And instead, you've betrayed me, she whispered, her voice cracking. This was supposed to be our moment, our celebration. Now it's just ruined. A heavy silence settled between us, thick with unspoken words. I could see the flicker of anger in her eyes begin to fade, replaced by disappointment and sorrow. The realization hit me harder than any dance move ever could. I had lost her trust, and now I was standing in the ruins of our relationship. I'm sorry, I finally said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. I thought I could make you see. See what? She asked, her voice steady despite the tears. That you could control me? That you could force me to choose? No, I thought I could make you understand how much it hurt, I replied, my voice cracking. I didn't want to lose you. But you did. You pushed me away when all I wanted was to bring us closer. Bet's words were like a dagger, piercing through the remnants of my resolve. I stood there, frozen, the weight of my actions suffocating me. The dance floor that had once felt like home was now a battleground, and I was left holding the shattered pieces of our love. As Betty turned to leave the dressing room, I knew that the path ahead would be difficult. I had to confront my own demons and face the consequences of my choices. But first, I had to let her go, if only for a moment. The days that followed the gala felt like a blur, a haze of regret and despair that clung to me like a heavy fog. Betty and I barely spoke, our once vibrant conversations reduced to cold, formal exchanges. The camaraderie that had fueled our partnership was extinguished, leaving only the ashes of betrayal. I threw myself into work, rehearsing alone in the studio, the silence amplifying my thoughts. Every step I took felt heavy, as if the weight of my choices was shackling my feet to the ground. The bright lights that had once illuminated my passion now felt like glaring spotlights on my failures. Betty had taken a leave of absence from rehearsals, retreating into herself. And I couldn't blame her. I had humiliated her in front of our peers, stripped away her dignity with my reckless need for revenge. I tried to convince myself that it was the only way to reveal the truth, but deep down, I knew I had crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed. One evening, after a long day of practice, I found myself sitting on the steps outside the studio, the cool night air brushing against my skin. The city buzzed around me, but I felt utterly alone. I pulled out my phone, staring at Bet's contact, my finger hovering over the call button. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. Apologies felt inadequate, yet I knew I had to reach out. Finally, I mustered the courage and dialed her number. The ringing echoed in the silence, each tone tightening the knot in my stomach. Andrew, she answered, her voice distant and guarded. Hey, it's me. Can we talk? I asked, my heart racing. I don't know if talking will change anything, she replied, the pain evident in her tone. Please, just give me a chance, I pleaded. I want to explain. There was a long pause before she finally spoke. Okay, but just for a little while. We agreed to meet at a small cafe near the studio, a neutral ground away from the memories of the stage. As I walked there, anxiety churned in my stomach. I was unsure if I would be able to convey the depth of my remorse or if she would even want to hear it. When I arrived, Betty was already seated, her expression a mixture of apprehension and hurt. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts before joining her at the table. Thanks for meeting me, I started, but the words felt inadequate against the weight of our situation. I didn't have much choice, did I? Betty replied, her tone sharp but with an undercurrent of sadness. I know I messed up. I acted out of anger, and I didn't think it through. I just wanted to show you how much it hurt to see you with him. My voice trembled as I spoke, the reality of my actions crashing down on me again. I understand that you were hurt, but you had no right to do what you did, she said, her eyes piercing into mine. You turned a personal issue into a public spectacle. I know, I admitted, guilt flooding my chest. I thought I could force you to see how serious this was. I wanted to protect what we had. But what you did shattered that trust, she replied, her voice breaking slightly. You didn't protect me, you attacked me. I can't just forget that. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. I could see the walls she had built around herself, fortified by my betrayal. Betty, I want to make it right, I said, my voice earnest. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I just need a chance. Do you even understand what making it right means? She asked, frustration simmering just beneath the surface. It's not just about fixing things on the surface. It's about trust, and you shattered that. I know, and I'm willing to earn it back, piece by piece. I responded, desperation creeping into my tone. But I need you to let me try. I can't just walk away from this without fighting for us. Betty looked down at her coffee, swirling the contents absent-mindedly. It's not that simple, Andrew. Trust takes time to rebuild, and right now, I don't know if I can even look at you without feeling that hurt. Then let's take it one step at a time, I suggested, my heart pounding. I can give you space. I can work on my own issues. But I need to know if you're willing to consider this. Quote. She finally met my gaze, her expression softening just a fraction. I don't know if I can. You've hurt me in a way that feels irreparable. I understand, I said quietly, swallowing the lump in my throat. But I'm asking you to at least think about it. We've built so much together, and I don't want to lose that without a fight. Betty sighed, her shoulders sagging as she leaned back in her chair. It's going to take time, Andrew. And I can't promise that I'll come around. That's all I'm asking for. I replied, hope flickering in my chest. Time to show you that I can change, that I can be better. As we sat in that small cafe, the distance between us felt less daunting. Maybe it wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, but it was a start, a fragile thread connecting us as we faced the aftermath of my choices. The road ahead would be long and uncertain, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. The days turned into weeks. And with each passing moment, I focused on taking those small steps toward rebuilding the trust I had shattered. Betty and I maintained a tentative connection, texting occasionally and meeting at the cafe to talk. Each conversation felt like walking on eggshells, but it was a start. I threw myself into my dancing, determined to refine my craft, both for myself and for Betty. The studio became my sanctuary, a place where I could channel my feelings into movement, trying to create something beautiful out of the wreckage of our relationship. I wanted to prove that I could be the partner she needed, one who respected her independence and dreams. One afternoon, as I practiced a new routine, I heard the door creak open behind me. I turned, and there stood Betty, her eyes scanning the studio. My heart raced at the sight of her, she had come to watch. Hey, I said, forcing a casualness into my tone. What brings you here? I wanted to see what you've been working on, she replied, stepping further into the space. There was a hint of hesitation in her voice, but also curiosity. I gestured for her to join me as I resumed the routine. The music filled the room, and I lost myself in the rhythm, pouring all my emotions into every movement. I could feel her watching intently, her gaze scrutinizing each turn and leap. When I finished, I turned to her, breathless and hopeful. What did you think? It was powerful, she admitted, her expression thoughtful. You've really been working hard. Thanks, I said, my heart swelling with the compliment. I want to create something special for us, something that shows how far I've come. She nodded, her expression softening. I can see that. But remember, it's not just about the dance. It's about understanding why things fell apart in the first place. I know, I said, the weight of my mistakes heavy on my shoulders. I'm working on myself, too. I've realized that I need to communicate better, to be more supportive of you and your dreams. As we talked, I noticed a flicker of warmth returning to her eyes. We spent the next hour discussing dance, our hopes for the future, and what it would take to rebuild our partnership. It felt good, almost like we were rediscovering each other again, piece by piece. After our conversation, Betty hesitated before speaking again. I've been thinking, maybe we could collaborate on something? A new routine, just like old times? The suggestion caught me off guard, but excitement surged through me. I'd love that. We could create something that reflects where we are now. All the struggles and triumphs. As we began brainstorming ideas for the new routine, I felt a renewed sense of hope. We worked together, laughing and sharing our creative visions, and for the first time in weeks, it felt like we were in sync again. In the days that followed, our rehearsals became a regular part of our lives. The studio was filled with laughter and music as we experimented with different styles, blending our unique strengths. Every time I looked at Betty, I saw glimpses of the person I had fallen in love with, the dancer who inspired me, the partner who challenged me. But beneath the surface, I was still haunted by the memory of my betrayal. As we spent time together, I couldn't shake the feeling that it would take more than just dance to mend our relationship. I needed to show her that I was committed to change, not just for her but for myself as well. One evening, after a particularly intense rehearsal, I invited Betty to stay for dinner. I wanted to create a more intimate setting, a moment where we could connect outside the dance floor. As we sat at the table, the aroma of the meal filled the air, and I could see the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. "This is nice," she said, taking a bite. "You've really outdone yourself." "I figured it was time to show you I can handle more than just choreography," I replied, trying to keep the mood light. "Maybe I can surprise you in more ways than one." Betty smiled, and the warmth spread through me. We talked about everything, from our childhood memories to our dreams for the future. Each shared story brought us closer, and I could feel the walls between us beginning to crumble. "Andrew," she said, her tone shifting slightly, "I appreciate what you're doing. It means a lot to me, but I need you to understand that rebuilding trust isn't just about the grand gestures. It's in the small moments, too." "I get that," I replied earnestly. "I want to be someone you can rely on. I don't want to lose you again." As we continued to talk, I realized how much I had missed this connection, the easy banter, the shared laughter. It was a reminder of the love we once had, and I felt a flicker of hope that perhaps we could find our way back to each other. After dinner, we returned to the studio to work on our routine. The energy between us was electric as we moved together, the choreography taking shape in ways that felt both familiar and new. Each turn and spin was a testament to our progress, a promise that we were willing to fight for our partnership. With every rehearsal, I could feel the distance between us closing, and I was determined to keep moving forward. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Betty by my side, I finally felt like I was on the right path. As the weeks went on, our rehearsals took on a new intensity. The creative energy between Betty and me transformed our studio sessions into a space of healing and rediscovery. We began to choreograph a piece that combined our distinct styles, weaving together the intricacies of our dance with the story of our relationship. One afternoon, as we were finalizing the routine, Betty suggested adding an emotional element to the performance, something that reflected our struggles and the journey we had taken to get here. "I think it's important to show the audience not just the beauty of dance but the raw honesty of our experience," she said, her eyes shining with inspiration. "I love that idea," I replied, feeling the spark of creativity ignite within me. "Let's incorporate movements that represent the pain, the betrayal, and ultimately, the redemption." As we worked on the piece, I noticed how the choreography began to echo our emotions. We used sharp, jagged movements to symbolize the conflict, followed by softer, flowing sequences that represented healing. It felt cathartic, each step allowing us to process our past while moving forward together. But as our performance date approached, I couldn't shake the nerves that crept in. What if we didn't execute it perfectly? What if the audience didn't connect with our story? The pressure was mounting, and I found myself questioning whether we were ready. One evening, after a particularly challenging rehearsal, I voiced my concerns to Betty. "What if we don't convey the message we want? What if it all falls apart on stage?" Betty paused, her expression thoughtful. "Andrew, it's not about perfection. It's about authenticity. We need to be true to our experience and let that guide us. The audience will feel the honesty in our performance." Her words struck a chord within me. I had been so focused on the technical aspects that I had almost lost sight of the emotional core of what we were creating. "You're right, we just need to trust ourselves and each other." As we continued to refine the choreography, I felt our connection deepen. There were moments when we locked eyes during a particularly intense section, and the unspoken understanding that passed between us was electric. We were no longer just partners in dance, we were partners in life, navigating the complexities of our relationship. Finally, the night of the performance arrived. The theater was buzzing with energy, and I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as I stood backstage, waiting for our turn. Betty was beside me, her fingers tapping nervously against her thigh. "Are you ready?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She took a deep breath, nodding. "More than ever. Let's show them what we've created." As we stepped onto the stage, the bright lights blinded me momentarily, but as the music began to play, everything else faded away. We moved as one, the choreography flowing seamlessly between us. Each twist and turn told our story, a narrative of pain and healing that resonated deep within me. As we reached the climax of the routine, I could feel the audience's energy enveloping us, their eyes fixed on our every move. I took a chance and poured my heart into the dance, allowing the emotions of our journey to seep into each step. Betty mirrored my intensity, and together we created a moment that felt transcendent. In the final pose, we held each other's gaze, the weight of our shared experience lingering in the air. The silence that followed was thick with emotion, and I could sense the audience holding their breath, fully immersed in the story we had told. Then, as the last notes of the music faded, the audience erupted into applause. It was a roar of appreciation, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. We had done it. We had shared our truth with the world. Betty turned to me, her eyes shining with tears of joy. "We did it," she exclaimed, laughter bubbling out as we embraced. In that moment, everything we had been through, the hurt, the betrayal, the journey of rebuilding, felt worth it. Backstage, the energy was electric. Dancers congratulated us, their smiles wide and genuine. But as the excitement swirled around us, I noticed a familiar face standing off to the side, Michael. My heart sank at the sight of him, memories of our past confrontation flooding back. "Andrew," he called, stepping forward. "I wanted to congratulate you both on a powerful performance." "Thanks," I replied, forcing a smile as I tried to mask my unease. "I can see the growth in your partnership," he continued, his gaze flickering between Betty and me. "It's clear you two have worked through a lot." Betty shifted beside me, and I could sense her discomfort. "We have," she said cautiously, "and it hasn't been easy." "Nothing worth having ever is," Michael responded, his tone surprisingly sincere. "I admire that you both were willing to fight for it." As he walked away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. I was grateful for his acknowledgement, but I couldn't shake the remnants of jealousy that still lingered. I knew I had to let go of that anger if I truly wanted to move forward with Betty. "Are you okay?" Betty asked, breaking through my thoughts. "Yeah, just processing everything," I admitted. "I don't want him to come between us again." "He won't," she assured me, placing a hand on my arm. "What we have now is stronger than any outside influence. We've fought for this, and I'm not willing to let anything jeopardize it again." Her words filled me with determination. We had made it through the storm, and now we could finally embrace the calm that followed. With the performance behind us, it felt like a new chapter was beginning, one where we could continue to grow together. As we stepped out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lifting. Whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them side by side, united in our journey. Together, we would dance into our future, hand in hand. In the days following our performance, the buzz of excitement lingered in the air. We received glowing feedback, and our social media profiles lit up with messages of admiration from friends and fans alike. Betty and I felt a renewed sense of purpose, and I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come together. Yet, amidst the euphoria, I knew there was still one thing left unresolved. The shadow of my betrayal loomed large, and I needed to confront it head-on. The lingering presence of Michael still nagged at me, reminding me that I hadn't fully addressed my insecurities. One evening, as I sat in our favorite cafe, I watched Betty across the table. She was animatedly discussing our next performance, her eyes sparkling with passion. I realized how much I admired her strength and resilience, and it pushed me to finally bring up the topic that had been weighing on my mind. "Betty," I started, my voice steady but my heart racing. "I think we need to talk about Michael." She paused, her expression shifting to one of concern. "What about him? I feel like I need to confront him. Not just for my own peace of mind, but for us. I don't want to let my insecurities get in the way of what we're building together." Bet's brow furrowed as she considered my words. "Are you sure that's a good idea? He's part of your past, Andrew. You've worked so hard to move forward." "I know, but I can't shake the feeling that if I don't address it, it will always linger," I replied, my conviction growing. "I need to stand up for what we have. I need to show you, and myself, that I'm not afraid." After a moment, Betty nodded slowly. Okay, if this is what you feel you need to do, I'll support you. But promise me that this isn't about proving anything to him. It's about you taking control of your own feelings. I promise, I said, relieved that she understood. We finished our coffee and I felt a sense of determination wash over me. I knew I had to do this, not just for myself, but for Betty and the future we were trying to build. The next day, I found out that Michael was teaching a workshop at a local dance studio. It felt like the perfect opportunity to confront him, and I resolved to attend. As I drove to the studio, a whirlwind of emotions swirled within me, nervousness, anger, but also a strange sense of empowerment. When I arrived, the studio was bustling with dancers eager to learn from him. I spotted Michael at the front, effortlessly leading the group through a warm-up routine. There was a part of me that still admired his talent, but I reminded myself of the pain he had caused. As the class progressed, I steeled my resolve. I knew I couldn't let my feelings fester any longer. When the session wrapped up, I approached him, heart pounding. Michael, I called, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. Andrew, I didn't expect to see you here. Can we talk? I asked, my tone firm yet measured. Sure, he replied, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. We stepped aside, away from the chatter of the other dancers. I wanted to address what happened between us, between you, Betty, and me, I said, taking a deep breath. I can't let my insecurities affect my relationship with her. I need to be clear about where I stand. Michael raised an eyebrow, leaning against the wall casually. Is that so? You really think this will help? It's not just about helping, I replied, feeling the heat of determination rise in me. It's about taking responsibility for my feelings and making sure I don't let them undermine what Betty and I have built. He studied me for a moment, a flicker of respect crossing his features. I appreciate your honesty, Andrew. But you should know that Betty is a strong woman. She can make her own choices. I know that, I said, my voice firm. But it doesn't change the fact that what you did hurt her and me. I'm not here to blame you. I just want to make it clear that I'm committed to her and our future. For a moment, the tension hung in the air between us. Finally, Michael nodded, his expression softening slightly. I understand. Betty deserves someone who will fight for her. I respect that. The acknowledgement surprised me, and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Thanks for understanding. As I walked away, I felt an unexpected sense of relief wash over me. I had faced my fears, and though it hadn't been easy, I knew I had taken a step toward reclaiming my confidence. Later that evening, I met Betty at the cafe, eager to share what had transpired. When I told her about the conversation, her eyes widened in surprise. You confronted him? She asked, a mixture of admiration and concern in her voice. I did. I needed to, I replied, feeling proud of myself. It felt good to finally stand up for what we have. Betty reached across the table, her hand resting on mine. I'm proud of you, Andrew. That took a lot of courage. It was all for you, I said, looking into her eyes. I want you to know that I'm all in. I'm ready to face anything that comes our way. As we sat together, I felt the connection between us strengthen. The walls that had once separated us beginning to crumble further. We had faced the shadows of our past, and together, we were carving out a future that felt brighter than ever. With each passing moment, I knew we were moving closer to a place of trust, love, and partnership. The journey wouldn't be without its challenges, but I was ready to take it on, with Betty by my side. With my confrontation with Michael behind me, I felt lighter, as if a heavy fog had finally lifted. Betty and I continued to rehearse for our next performance. And with every session, I could sense our bond growing stronger. The emotional weight we had carried seemed to transform into a shared resolve, a commitment to moving forward together. One evening, after an intense rehearsal, Betty suggested we take a break and go for a walk in the nearby park. I think it'll be good for us to step away from the studio for a bit, she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. As we strolled beneath the warm glow of the streetlights, the atmosphere felt electric. I reveled in the feeling of her hand entwined with mine, a silent promise that we were on this journey together. Can you believe how far we've come? Betty asked, her voice bright. It feels like just yesterday we were drowning in all that chaos. It really does, I replied, glancing at her. I'm proud of us for pushing through. It's a reminder that we can overcome anything if we're willing to fight for it. Betty smiled, and in that moment, I realized how much I had missed the lightness we used to share. I felt a flicker of hope for our future, one where we could create and inspire together. As we continued our walk, we stumbled upon a small outdoor stage where a community dance event was taking place. The atmosphere was lively, with performers showcasing their talents in front of an enthusiastic audience. Bet's eyes lit up, and she turned to me, her excitement infectious. "Let's join in," she exclaimed, pulling me toward the stage. "We can show them our new routine." Before I could fully process what was happening, Betty had dragged me onto the stage. I felt a rush of adrenaline as we stood there, the audience's eyes turning toward us. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, a mix of nerves and thrill coursing through me. "Absolutely. Let's show them what we've got." Betty grinned, and as the music began to play, we fell into the familiar rhythm of our choreography. Dancing in front of an audience felt exhilarating. The rush of performing together reignited that spark I had longed for. With every movement, I could see the audience responding, their energy feeding into our performance. We executed the routine flawlessly, our bodies moving in perfect harmony as we conveyed the depth of our journey through dance. As we reached the final pose, I glanced at Betty, and we shared a moment of unspoken understanding. We had not only performed a dance, we had told our story, one of pain, healing, and the triumph of love. The crowd erupted into applause, and I felt a swell of joy and gratitude. Betty turned to me, her face beaming. "That was incredible," she said, breathless from the adrenaline. "Yeah, it really was," I replied, my heart racing. "I think we just reignited something amazing." After our impromptu performance, we were greeted by enthusiastic compliments from the audience and fellow dancers. The atmosphere buzzed with excitement, and it felt like a celebration of our journey. Later, as we walked home, the night air was filled with laughter and chatter. I felt a sense of unity with Betty, as if we were truly on the same path again. "I think we should perform more often," Betty suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Maybe we could put together a series of community performances to showcase our work." "I love that idea," I replied, feeling inspired. "It would be a great way to share our story and connect with others. We can inspire them just like we've inspired each other." As we brainstormed ideas, I realized how far we had come, not just as dancers but as partners. We had faced our demons and emerged stronger, more connected than ever. The next few weeks were filled with planning and rehearsing for our upcoming community performances. Betty and I dove into our work with renewed energy, blending our styles and creating new pieces that captured the essence of our journey. Each rehearsal felt like a celebration, a reaffirmation of our commitment to each other and our art. As we prepared for the first performance of the series, I found myself reflecting on everything we had overcome. The fear, the heartache, and the moments of doubt had all led us to this point. I felt a sense of gratitude for the struggles that had shaped us, for they had made our connection even more profound. On the night of our first performance, the energy in the community center was electric. Friends, family, and even strangers filled the seats, eagerly awaiting our show. I could feel the familiar rush of nerves mixed with excitement as I stood backstage with Betty, our hearts beating in sync. "Are you ready?" I asked, squeezing her hand. "More than ever," she replied, her confidence radiating. As we stepped onto the stage, the bright lights engulfed us once again. The audience fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. With the first notes of the music, we began our routine, pouring our hearts into every movement. The performance was exhilarating, a whirlwind of emotion and energy. With each step, I felt a deeper connection to Betty, as if we were not just dancing for the audience, but for ourselves, celebrating our journey and the love that had brought us here. As we reached the final pose, the audience erupted into applause once more, and I turned to Betty, our eyes locking in a moment of pure joy. We had done it. We had shared our story, and it resonated with everyone in the room. Backstage, the buzz of excitement filled the air as we received compliments from our friends and fellow dancers. It felt like a family, a community united by the power of dance and the stories we all carried. As we celebrated our success, I realized that this was just the beginning. Together, we were embarking on a new chapter, one filled with promise, creativity, and the unwavering belief that we could face anything as long as we had each other. With the success of our first community performance behind us, Betty and I were riding high on a wave of inspiration. We had gained confidence in our routine, and the response from the audience only fueled our excitement to keep going. However, the thrill of our newfound momentum came with unforeseen challenges. As we prepared for the next performance, I noticed a shift in Betty. She seemed more focused on the choreography than ever, but I could sense an underlying tension. During rehearsals, she often pulled away, lost in her thoughts. "Hey, everything okay?" I asked one evening after we finished a particularly intense session. We were both sweaty and out of breath, but I could tell she wasn't her usual self. She paused, her brow furrowed. "I'm just feeling a lot of pressure, you know? I want everything to be perfect." "Perfect?" I echoed, surprised. "Betty, we're not aiming for perfection. We're sharing our story, and that's what matters." "I know, but," she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I feel like there's so much riding on this. I want to make sure we do well for everyone who's supported us." I stepped closer, trying to understand her perspective. "I get that, but remember why we started doing this. It's about connecting with people, not just performing flawlessly." Betty nodded, but I could see the worry in her eyes. "I know, but I just can't shake this feeling. What if we let everyone down?" Her words struck a chord deep within me. I had my own fears, but I pushed them aside for her sake. "We won't let anyone down. We've worked too hard for that. Let's focus on enjoying the process together." As the next performance approached, Betty and I found ourselves in a rhythm of rehearsals, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The pressure seemed to weigh heavier on her, and it affected our dynamic. During one particularly grueling rehearsal, Betty stumbled on a complicated sequence. Frustration clouded her face, and without thinking, I reached out to help her, but she jerked away. "Don't, just let me do this," she snapped, her voice sharp. The words stung, and I took a step back, hurt. "Betty, I'm just trying to help. We're in this together." "I know, but I feel like I can't rely on anyone right now," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to prove to myself that I can do this." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You're an incredible dancer, and you're doing this because you love it. Remember that." She looked away, her expression conflicted. "I just want to be the best version of myself for this performance, for us." Seeing her struggle pained me, but I didn't know how to help. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of our situation. I wanted to be there for her, but I feared that my support might feel like pressure to her. The night of our second community performance arrived, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Friends and family filled the seats once again, but the tension between Betty and me felt palpable. I could sense her nerves radiating as we stood backstage, preparing to go on. "Are you ready?" I asked, hoping to ease her anxiety. "Yeah, just a little nervous," she admitted, avoiding my gaze. "Let's remember to breathe," I suggested, trying to keep things light. "We're going out there to tell our story, and that's all that matters." As we stepped onto the stage, I could feel the audience's energy washing over us. We launched into our routine, but I noticed Betty was off, her movements more rigid than fluid. I tried to connect with her through our choreography, but I could see her focus drifting. In a pivotal moment of the performance, she misstepped, causing a ripple effect that disrupted our flow. Panic flashed in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I felt our connection slip. We both recovered quickly, but I could sense the shift. The audience responded with supportive applause, but I knew that Betty was feeling the weight of her own expectations. After the performance, we were met with applause and cheers, but I could see the frustration etched on Bet's face. As soon as we were off stage, she collapsed onto a nearby bench. Her hands trembling. "I messed up," she said, her voice breaking. "I ruined it." "No, you didn't," I said firmly, sitting beside her. "You were amazing, and we told our story. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. But I wanted it to be perfect," she exclaimed, tears welling in her eyes. "I just feel like I let everyone down, including you." "Betty, listen to me," I said, taking her hands in mine. "You didn't let anyone down. You've put your heart and soul into this. What we're doing is about connection, not perfection. You have to remember that." She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. "I just wanted it to go well." "I know," I said softly. "But we're in this together. Let's talk about it. What's really bothering you?" After a long pause, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I think I've been so focused on the outcome that I've lost sight of the joy we used to find in dance. It feels like I'm losing myself in all this pressure." Hearing her vulnerability cut deep, and I felt a wave of empathy wash over me. "You're not losing yourself. You're just navigating through the challenges. Let's take a step back and remember why we started this journey in the first place." Betty nodded, her expression softening. I think I need that. I'm sorry for pushing you away. I just didn't want to disappoint anyone. You could never disappoint me, I assured her. We're a team, and we'll get through this together. Let's refocus on what brought us here. Our love for dance and each other. Quote. As we talked, I could see the tension in her shoulders begin to ease. We spent the next hour discussing our feelings, brainstorming ways to approach our performances without the burden of perfection. I want to find joy in this again, she said, her voice steadying. I want us to create together, to share our love for dance without the pressure. Exactly, I agreed, feeling a renewed sense of hope. Let's create a performance that celebrates our journey, flaws and all. That night, as we left the theater hand in hand, I felt a sense of relief wash over us. We had faced our challenges and emerged stronger, more connected than ever. The journey wouldn't always be easy, but together, we could navigate the ups and downs, reclaiming the joy that brought us together in the first place. With each step forward, I felt a deeper understanding of our partnership, a commitment to grow, support, and dance through whatever life threw our way. After our heartfelt conversation, Betty and I began to shift our focus. The weight of perfectionism that had overshadowed our rehearsals slowly lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and joy. We decided to approach our upcoming performances with an emphasis on creativity and expression rather than flawless execution. In the following weeks, we set aside time to experiment with new choreography, allowing our instincts to guide us. Instead of rehearsing the same routine over and over, we played with movement, incorporating improvisation and spontaneity. Each session felt like a breath of fresh air, a return to the essence of why we fell in love with dance in the first place. One afternoon, as we danced in the studio, I felt the energy between us shift. Betty moved with such grace and freedom, her laughter filling the space as she encouraged me to let loose. Just feel it, Andrew. Let the music guide you. I followed her lead, releasing my inhibitions and losing myself in the rhythm. We twirled, leapt, and spun, the world outside fading away. In that moment, it was just us, the music, the dance, and the joy of being together. See? This is what it's all about. Betty shouted, her smile bright as she caught my eye. Absolutely, I replied, exhilarated. This is the connection we've been missing. As the days passed, our routines evolved. We began to weave in elements of storytelling, using our movements to express the journey we had taken, our struggles, our triumphs, and the love that anchored us. Each performance became a canvas, an opportunity to share our hearts with the audience. On the night of our next performance, I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness, but this time it was different. Instead of dreading the pressure to be perfect, I was eager to showcase our authentic selves. The theater buzzed with anticipation as friends and family filled the seats, their faces lighting up with smiles. Backstage, I turned to Betty, who was stretching and humming to herself. Are you ready for this? More than ever, she said, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Let's show them what we've created. As we stepped onto the stage, I felt the warmth of the spotlight envelop us. The audience quieted, and as the music began, I locked eyes with Betty. We moved as one, our bodies telling the story of our journey, the pain, the healing, and the deep connection we shared. The performance flowed seamlessly, each movement an expression of our love and resilience. The audience was captivated, their energy feeding into our dance. I felt a rush of joy as we entered the final sequence, our movements perfectly in sync, reflecting the harmony we had found. When we struck the final pose, the applause erupted like a wave, enveloping us in a moment of triumph. I turned to Betty, and we shared a glance that said everything. We had reclaimed our joy, and it showed in every movement. After the performance, we were met with hugs and congratulations from our friends and fellow dancers. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter and excitement. Betty and I felt like we had truly shared a piece of ourselves with the world. Later that night, as we walked home, I could see the joy radiating from Betty. That was amazing. I feel like we've really found our groove again, she said, her smile infectious. I couldn't agree more, I replied, my heart full. It feels like we're back to being ourselves. As we reached our apartment, I poured us both a glass of wine, and we settled onto the couch. The adrenaline of the performance still buzzed in the air, and we couldn't stop talking about the night. I can't believe how far we've come, Betty said, her eyes shining. It feels like we've gone through this incredible transformation together. It really does, I replied. And to think it all started with a conversation about letting go of perfection. Yeah, she said, leaning closer. I think we've learned that the real beauty lies in our connection, in being vulnerable with each other. That's what resonates with the audience. As the evening wore on, we reminisced about our journey, every challenge, every triumph, and the love that had pulled us through. The more we talked, the more I realized how vital this experience had been for both of us. It was a reminder that while the path may not always be smooth, our bond was stronger than any obstacle. In the weeks that followed, we continued to perform in our community series, each show becoming more vibrant and full of life. Audiences responded with enthusiasm, and the feedback we received inspired us to keep pushing the boundaries of our art. We began collaborating with other dancers, integrating their styles into our performances and creating a beautiful tapestry of movement and expression. One evening, after a particularly successful show, we celebrated with our friends at a local diner. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and camaraderie. Betty and I shared stories about our performances, and I couldn't help but admire how far she had come, not just as a dancer, but as a person. I'm so grateful for this journey, Betty said, looking around at our friends. I never thought I'd find such a supportive community. Me too, I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest. It's incredible to see how art can bring people together. As the night continued, I watched Betty interact with our friends, her laughter bright and contagious. In that moment, I realized that she was truly thriving, and it filled me with a sense of pride. Later, as we walked home, I felt a surge of gratitude. You know, I think we're on the brink of something incredible, I said, glancing at her. We've tapped into a well of creativity that I believe can take us to new heights. Betty smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. I believe that too. Together, we can create something beautiful. With our hearts aligned and our spirits soaring, I felt a sense of optimism for the future. The challenges we faced had only strengthened our connection, and together, we were ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. In that moment, I knew that no matter the obstacles, we would continue to dance through life side by side, finding joy in each step of our journey. As the weeks turned into months, Betty and I settled into a rhythm of performances that not only showcased our growth as dancers but also deepened our connection as partners. Our community embraced us, and the love and support we received fueled our passion for dance even more. But as we prepared for our biggest performance yet, a collaborative show with several local dance troupes, I sensed a change in the air. The anticipation for the event was palpable, and while I was excited, a nagging feeling crept into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift. The rehearsal schedule intensified, and we found ourselves juggling our routine alongside other performers. Betty thrived in this environment, her energy infectious, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. Long hours and the pressure of collaboration began to wear her down, even if she wouldn't admit it. One afternoon, after a particularly exhausting rehearsal, Betty sat on the studio floor, visibly drained. I approached her, concern flooding my thoughts. Hey, you okay? I'm fine, she replied quickly, but the weariness in her eyes betrayed her. Just a little tired. We've been going hard for this show. Maybe we should take a break? I suggested gently. It might help clear your head. She shook her head, determination etched on her face. No, we need to keep pushing. This is a big opportunity for us. Quote. I knew she was right, but I also felt the weight of her exhaustion. I decided to let it go, trusting that she would speak up if she really needed a breather. We continued to rehearse, but I couldn't help but notice the little signs. Her smile wasn't as bright, and her movements felt a bit stiffer than before. As the day of the performance approached, our excitement was mixed with a layer of tension. On the night of the show, the theater was packed with eager spectators. The atmosphere was electric, filled with the buzzing energy of anticipation. Backstage, the excitement was palpable, but so was the nervousness. I watched as Betty fidgeted with her costume, her expression a blend of determination and apprehension. You ready for this? I asked, trying to ease her nerves. Yeah, totally, she said, but I could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes. As we took our places on stage, the lights dimmed and the audience quieted. The first act was a series of group performances, showcasing the diverse talents of the dancers. I could see Bet's focus intensify as she watched the others, but I also noticed her anxiety creeping back in. When it was finally our turn, we stepped into the spotlight, our hearts racing. We launched into our routine, pouring everything we had into the performance. But as the dance progressed, I felt a shift. Betty hesitated during a pivotal moment, and I instinctively adjusted to keep us in sync. The performance was going well, but I could feel the pressure building. In the final sequence, Betty misstepped again, causing us to falter momentarily. I caught her eye, and for a brief second, I saw fear and frustration flash across her face. As we finished the routine, the audience erupted into applause, but I could see that Betty was shaken. When we stepped off stage, I wrapped my arms around her, trying to offer comfort. "You did great, Betty. The audience loved it." "I messed up," she said, her voice trembling. I felt it slipping away. "Betty, it's okay. We'll work through it together." I reassured her, but deep down, I could feel the tension between us building. In the following days, the post-performance excitement faded, and the strain began to take its toll. Betty threw herself into rehearsals, trying to shake off the feeling of inadequacy, but I could see the toll it was taking on her. One evening, I found her sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the wall. "Betty, can we talk?" I asked gently. She turned to me, her eyes weary. "About what?" "About how you've been feeling. I know things have been tough since the show. You don't have to pretend with me." "I'm just frustrated," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could handle everything, but I feel like I'm falling apart." My heart sank. "You're not falling apart. You've just been under a lot of pressure. We can take a step back if that's what you need." "I don't want to let anyone down," she said, tears brimming in her eyes. "I've always wanted to be the best. I can't shake the feeling that I'm not good enough." I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You are more than enough, Betty. You're an incredible dancer, and you're amazing just the way you are. We're a team, and we'll get through this together." She looked down, her voice trembling. "What if I can't bounce back from this? What if I disappoint everyone?" I took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "Disappointment is a part of life. What matters is how we respond to it. Let's not lose sight of why we started dancing in the first place." Betty nodded, her expression softening slightly. "I just want to feel like myself again." As we talked, I realized that we needed to take a step back, not just from rehearsals but from the pressure we had placed on ourselves. We needed to rediscover the joy that had initially brought us together. The next day, I proposed a different approach. "Let's take a break from our routine. How about we spend a few days just dancing for ourselves? No pressure, no audience, just us." Bet's eyes brightened a bit. "That sounds nice. I think I'd like that." And so, we devoted the next few days to dance without expectation. We played music that made us smile and allowed ourselves to explore new movements without any restrictions. We laughed, spun, and even fell into silly improvisations, embracing the joy of simply being in the moment. Gradually, I could see Betty start to relax, her laughter returning as she let go of her anxieties. We took our time, savoring each movement as if it were a conversation, a dialogue between our hearts. On the last day of our break, we found ourselves in a small studio, the sunlight streaming through the windows. As we danced together, I felt the spark reignite. Bet's spirit shone brighter than ever, and I knew we were on the right path. As we finished an impromptu routine, we collapsed onto the floor, breathless and laughing. "I missed this," Betty said, her face glowing with happiness. "Me too," I replied, feeling the warmth of our connection wrap around us. This is what dance is all about. With renewed energy, we headed into the next phase of our journey, one that would allow us to embrace the unexpected, to face challenges head-on, and to rediscover the joy that had brought us together in the first place. We were ready to dance again, not just for an audience, but for each other and the love that had blossomed along the way. With our newfound perspective on dance, Betty and I dove headfirst into our next performance, the excitement bubbling within us. We were no longer weighed down by the fear of perfection. Instead, we were fueled by the joy of sharing our passion with others. As we entered the final week of rehearsals, the energy in the studio was electric. We incorporated the spontaneous movements we had explored during our break, allowing them to flow seamlessly into our routine. Each session felt more like a celebration than a chore, and I could see the transformation in Betty. She was radiating confidence, her laughter echoing through the studio, infectious and vibrant. But as the performance date drew closer, an undercurrent of anxiety rippled through me. I had a secret I hadn't shared with Betty, and it gnawed at my conscience. While I was eager to embrace our journey together, I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to address my own concerns. On the day before the show, I decided it was time to confront my fears. As we sat in our apartment, relaxing after rehearsal, I turned to Betty. Can we talk about something important? Of course, she replied, looking up from her phone, her expression curious. I've been thinking about our performance tomorrow, I started, feeling my heart race. And I wanted to share something that's been on my mind. Betty tilted her head, a hint of concern creeping into her eyes. What is it? I know we've been focusing on joy and expression, and that's been incredible. But I can't help but feel like we should also be prepared for anything that might happen on stage, I admitted, my voice steadying. What if we stumble again? What if we don't connect the way we want to? Her brow furrowed slightly as she processed my words. Are you worried about that? I guess I am, I confessed. I want to protect what we've built, and I don't want either of us to feel like we failed. I just think we should talk about how we'd handle it if something goes wrong. Betty paused, her expression softening. You're right, we should have a plan. But I want you to remember, no matter what happens, we're in this together. The audience is here to see us, to feel our connection. Not just the choreography. I know, I replied, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. But it's good to be prepared for anything. How about we agree to keep it light? If something doesn't go according to plan, let's just roll with it and keep going. She nodded, a smile returning to her face. That sounds good. We'll adapt and find the joy in the moment, no matter what. With that conversation behind us, we spent the rest of the evening relaxing and focusing on the excitement of the upcoming performance. We laughed, reminisced about our journey, and visualized how we wanted the show to unfold. The next day arrived, and the atmosphere in the theater was buzzing with anticipation. Friends, family, and community members gathered, their faces filled with excitement. Backstage, we warmed up together, exchanging nervous glances and encouraging words. As we stood in the wings, waiting for our cue, I felt a mixture of adrenaline and calm wash over me. We've got this, I said, squeezing Bet's hand. Together, she echoed, her eyes sparkling. When it was finally our turn to take the stage, the spotlight shone brightly, and the audience fell silent. We took a deep breath and stepped into the light, our hearts pounding in sync with the music. The performance began, and everything felt electric. We danced with abandon, weaving through the movements we had worked so hard to perfect. The audience was captivated, their energy lifting us higher. But halfway through our routine, as we transitioned into a particularly intricate sequence, I felt a shift in Bet's momentum. She stumbled slightly, her foot catching awkwardly on the floor. Instinct kicked in, and I reached out to steady her, but the moment felt like it hung in the air. Time seemed to slow down as I watched her regain her balance, but I could see the flicker of panic in her eyes. We locked eyes for just a moment, and in that instant, I could feel the weight of our unspoken fears. Keep going, I silently urged her, and we both adjusted, adapting to the moment. Instead of spiraling into anxiety, we leaned into the unexpected. With a shared understanding, we transitioned seamlessly into the next sequence, our movements flowing as if nothing had happened. The audience remained captivated, unaware of the moment of uncertainty that had almost derailed us. As we reached the final sequence, the applause began to build. I could feel Bet's confidence returning, and we danced with an intensity fueled by adrenaline and connection. In those last moments, it felt as if we were channeling everything we had experienced together, the struggles, the triumphs, and the joy of being in the moment. When we struck our final pose, the audience erupted into applause, their cheers echoing throughout the theater. Betty and I stood there, breathless and exhilarated, the realization of what we had accomplished washing over us. We had faced a moment of uncertainty and emerged stronger, together. After the performance, we were greeted with hugs and congratulations from friends and fellow dancers. I could see the joy radiating from Betty, her face aglow with the excitement of our shared experience. I can't believe we did it, she exclaimed, her laughter ringing in the air. Yeah, and we handled that stumble like pros, I replied, unable to contain my pride. As we celebrated with our friends, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey we had taken together. We had faced our fears, embraced the unexpected, and found a new level of connection through it all. Later that night, as we lay in bed, I turned to Betty. I'm so proud of us. We didn't just perform, we really danced together. Absolutely, she said, her eyes shining. And it felt so liberating to let go of the pressure and just be in the moment. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her close. Whatever comes next, I know we can handle it together. We've learned to dance through life, and I wouldn't want to do it with anyone else. Betty smiled, her heart mirrored in her eyes. Me neither. Here's to many more adventures together. Quote dot. With that, we drifted off to sleep, our hearts full and ready for whatever the future held, knowing that as long as we had each other, we could face anything that came our way. In the weeks following our successful performance, Betty and I found ourselves riding a wave of momentum. The buzz from our show lingered, and we received invitations to collaborate with other local artists. It felt like our community was finally recognizing the unique chemistry we had cultivated on stage, and the excitement was palpable. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a rehearsal, I received a call from a well-known dance producer named Rachel. She had heard about our performance and wanted to discuss a potential opportunity. My heart raced at the thought of what this could mean for both of us. Andrew, you won't believe this, I exclaimed, turning to Betty as I hung up the phone. Rachel wants to meet with us about a project she's working on. Bet's eyes lit up with excitement. That's incredible. What's the project about? She didn't give too many details, but it sounds like she's looking for fresh talent to collaborate on a new dance piece. She's seen our performances and thinks we'd be a great fit. Betty beamed, her enthusiasm infectious. We had to meet with her. This could be our chance to really take our dance to the next level. We scheduled a meeting with Rachel for later that week, and as the day approached, my excitement was tinged with nerves. What if we weren't what she expected? What if we couldn't meet her vision? I tried to push those thoughts aside, reminding myself of the confidence we had built through our recent performances. When we arrived at Rachel's studio, I was struck by the energy of the place. The walls were lined with mirrors, and the sound of music filled the air. Rachel greeted us warmly, her presence commanding yet approachable. Thank you both for coming. I've been looking forward to this, she said, gesturing for us to sit down. I saw your performance, and I was blown away by the connection you have on stage. I think you both have a unique voice in the dance community. And I'd love to work with you. Bet's excitement was palpable. Thank you. We're really passionate about expressing ourselves through dance. What do you have in mind? Rachel leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. I'm putting together a contemporary piece that explores themes of connection and vulnerability. I think your style would bring something fresh and dynamic to it. I want to create a piece that challenges the traditional boundaries of dance, something that resonates with the audience on a deeper level. Quote dot. I exchanged a glance with Betty, feeling a surge of excitement. That sounds incredible, I said. What would our role be in this project? I want you to be the central duo, Rachel explained. You'll work together to develop the choreography, drawing from your experiences and connection as a couple. I believe your personal journey can inspire the piece and help convey the emotions I want to capture. Bet's eyes shone with excitement, and I felt my heart race. We would love that. We've been exploring our connection through dance already. And this seems like a perfect fit. Rachel smiled, clearly pleased. Great. We can start with some workshops to brainstorm ideas, and then we'll move into the choreography. I want this to be a collaborative process, where your voices and experiences shape the final piece. As we discussed the logistics, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This project was exactly what we needed. A chance to create something meaningful while continuing to deepen our connection through dance. Over the next few weeks, we dove into the project with enthusiasm. Our workshops with Rachel were a blend of creativity and exploration. We shared our ideas, played with movement, and opened up about our experiences. The process felt liberating, and I could see how it sparked a new light in Bet's eyes. One day during a workshop, as we experimented with different movements, I suggested incorporating elements from our past performances. What if we use some of the improvisation we explored earlier? It really showcased our spontaneity and connection. Quote dot. Betty nodded, her face lighting up. Yes. Let's take those moments where we let go of the choreography and just dance together. That's where our magic lies. Rachel encouraged us to dig deeper, guiding us through exercises that challenged us to express vulnerability in our movements. We shared personal stories that inspired the choreography, and with each session, our connection deepened. As we began to develop the choreography, I noticed a shift in Betty. The spark of creativity reignited her spirit, and she began to embrace the challenge of exploring new emotional depths in our dance. But with this new opportunity came new pressures. As we began to share snippets of our progress on social media, excitement was met with a wave of scrutiny. Comments flooded in, some praising our creativity while others questioned our ability to carry such an ambitious project. I could see the weight of the criticism start to affect Betty. One evening, after a particularly challenging rehearsal, I found her sitting on the couch. Her expression distant. "Betty, what's wrong?" I asked, sensing her unease. "I don't know if I can handle the pressure," she admitted, her voice trembling. "What if we can't live up to the expectations? What if we disappoint Rachel and everyone else?" I sat down beside her, taking her hands in mine. "You are so talented, and we've come so far. Remember what we talked about when we stumbled during our last performance? It's okay to feel vulnerable. This is a part of our journey, and we're in it together." Quote. Betty looked down, tears welling in her eyes. "I just don't want to let you down. I want to be good enough for this." "You are more than enough," I reassured her, my voice steady. "We're not here to meet anyone's expectations but our own. Let's focus on creating something meaningful for us. The audience will feel our connection, and that's what matters." She nodded slowly, a flicker of determination returning to her gaze. "You're right, we can do this. Let's keep pushing forward." With that renewed spirit, we threw ourselves into the project even more. As we continued to create and refine our choreography, I could feel the magic of our connection pouring into the piece. The process became a dance of its own, an exploration of our vulnerabilities, fears, and triumphs. As the performance date approached, I felt a sense of excitement mixed with nerves. This piece was more than just a performance, it was a reflection of our journey together. On the night of the show, the theater buzzed with anticipation. Friends, family, and supporters filled the seats, and I could feel the energy in the air. Backstage, Betty and I exchanged reassuring smiles, knowing we were ready to embrace whatever came our way. As we stepped onto the stage, the lights illuminating our path, I felt a rush of gratitude. No matter the outcome, we had already accomplished so much together. And as the music began to play, I knew that we were about to share a piece of our hearts with the world, vulnerable and real. This was our moment, and together, we would dance through it all. The moment the curtain lifted, the stage was awash in light, and I felt the electric buzz of anticipation course through me. Betty and I stood at the edge of the stage, our hearts pounding in sync, ready to embark on this journey together. The music swelled, a haunting melody that intertwined with the emotions we had poured into our choreography. As we stepped forward, the audience fell silent, their eyes locked onto us. I could feel the weight of their gaze. But instead of feeling pressure, I felt buoyed by it. This was our time to share our story. We began with a duet that embodied the essence of our connection, fluid, expressive, and filled with unspoken understanding. As we moved, I could see Betty transform, her confidence radiating with each step. We wove through the choreography, drawing from the moments of vulnerability and spontaneity we had explored during our rehearsals. But as we progressed through the piece, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was building within the performance. It was as if the choreography had taken on a life of its own, guiding us to a pivotal moment, a climax that mirrored our journey. In the middle of the routine, we transitioned into a section that required us to mirror each other's movements, a symbolic representation of our connection. As I looked into Bet's eyes, I felt a surge of emotions, love, fear, and the shared weight of our experiences. I could sense the audience leaning in, captivated by the authenticity of our expression. Then came the unexpected moment that would forever change the course of our performance. As we reached the climax of the piece, I decided to deviate slightly from the choreography. I pulled Betty into an unplanned spin, letting the music guide us into a free-form expression of everything we had been through together. The moment felt alive. As we danced freely, I could see the audience react, their breaths caught in their throats as they watched us embrace our vulnerability. It was a risk, but in that instant, it felt right. I could feel the weight of our journey, the pressure, the joy, the connection, pouring into our movements. But then, as we spun back into our structured routine, I noticed something unexpected. Bet's expression shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. In that moment, I realized she had felt the spontaneity I had introduced and was unsure of how to follow. Instinctively, I reached for her hand, grounding her in the moment. "Trust me," I whispered. And she nodded, her eyes narrowing with determination. We continued the piece, weaving in and out of our planned movements and the newfound freedom we had discovered together. The audience was enraptured, their energy feeding into our performance. The emotion was raw and palpable, a beautiful dance of connection. As we approached the finale, I felt the weight of everything we had experienced together, the challenges, the doubts, and the triumphs, all coalesce into one powerful moment. In our final pose, we faced the audience, hands intertwined, our breaths mingling in a moment of shared vulnerability. The theater erupted into applause, a thunderous wave of appreciation that washed over us. I could see tears in the eyes of some audience members, and I felt a swell of pride. We had not only performed, we had connected on a level that transcended the stage. When we stepped off stage, we were met with hugs and congratulations from our friends and fellow dancers. I looked at Betty. Her face flushed with excitement, and I felt an overwhelming rush of gratitude for everything we had accomplished together. "Did you feel that?" she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy. "That was incredible. It was amazing," I replied, still buzzing from the performance. We really let go and embraced the moment. Rachel approached us, her expression beaming. "You both were phenomenal. The audience was completely captivated. You took risks, and it paid off. I'm so proud of what you've created together." As the night wore on, we celebrated with friends, laughing and sharing stories about the performance. I could see the weight of the past weeks lifting off Bet's shoulders, replaced by a newfound confidence. She was radiant, and I couldn't help but admire her resilience. But amidst the celebration, a thought lingered in the back of my mind. We had faced challenges together, but there was still an unresolved tension, an undercurrent of doubt that I knew we needed to address. Later that night, as the celebration dwindled and we found ourselves alone in our apartment, I turned to Betty. "Can we talk about what happened on stage tonight?" She looked at me, her expression curious but slightly guarded. "What do you mean?" "When we transitioned into the freeform movement, I felt a shift in you. It was like you weren't sure how to follow. I don't want you to feel pressured to stick to the choreography if you want to explore more," I said gently. Betty sighed, her shoulders relaxing. "I appreciate you bringing this up. I did feel a bit thrown off, but I think it was also a moment of realization for me. I've been so focused on meeting expectations that I forgot to just embrace the dance." I reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. "You don't have to worry about expectations with me. We're in this together, and I want you to feel free to express yourself in whatever way feels right." She smiled, the tension in her shoulders easing. "Thank you for saying that. I think I needed to hear it. I want to keep exploring, keep pushing our boundaries." With that, we settled into a comfortable silence, our hearts still racing from the performance. I felt a deep sense of connection, knowing we had navigated the highs and lows of our journey together. As we drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the feeling that this performance had been a turning point for us. We had not only embraced our connection but also discovered a deeper layer of vulnerability in our dance, a revelation that would guide us as we continued our journey together. The next morning, I woke up to find Betty already in the living room, stretching and moving to soft music. I smiled, watching her flow effortlessly through the movements. There was a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before, and I knew we were ready to take on whatever came next. As we began our day, we discussed new ideas for our dance, the possibilities feeling endless. With every moment we spent together, I felt our bond strengthen, our creativity flourish. Together, we were not just a couple, we were a force of expression, ready to embrace the unexpected and dance our truth. And as we moved forward, I knew that this was just the beginning of our journey, a journey filled with passion, vulnerability, and the power of connection. As weeks turned into months, our collaboration with Rachel flourished. The contemporary piece we were creating was evolving, becoming something deeper and more profound than either of us had anticipated. Each rehearsal pushed us to explore new dimensions of our connection, both as dancers and as partners. But as we continued to embrace our creative journey, life outside the studio began to throw unexpected challenges our way. Betty and I found ourselves navigating the complexities of our personal lives, balancing the demands of our burgeoning careers with the intensity of our relationship. One evening, after a particularly grueling rehearsal, we settled down in our favorite cafe, the comforting aroma of coffee surrounding us. Betty looked pensive, stirring her drink absent-mindedly. "Andrew, do you ever feel overwhelmed by everything happening right now?" I took a moment to consider her question, the weight of our recent commitments settling in. "Yeah, I do. It feels like everything is moving so fast. I love what we're creating, but sometimes it feels like we're juggling too much." She sighed, her brow furrowing. I've been feeling that way, too. It's amazing to be working on this piece, but I'm also juggling work and my family's expectations. It feels like I'm constantly trying to prove myself. I reached across the table, taking her hand. You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Betty. You're already incredible. We're in this together, and we'll figure it out. But what if I'm not enough? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I can't handle it all? In that moment, I saw the vulnerability in her eyes, something I had come to recognize as both beautiful and fragile. You are more than enough. Remember what we talked about when we stumbled during our performance? It's okay to feel vulnerable. It's part of being human. Part of being an artist. She nodded, her gaze softening. I know, but sometimes it's hard to let go of the fear. I don't want to disappoint you or Rachel or anyone else. You won't, I assured her. We'll face whatever comes together. Let's take a step back and breathe. We can prioritize what matters most. As the conversation flowed, I felt a sense of relief wash over us. We had created a safe space to voice our fears, something that was essential to navigating the challenges ahead. The next day, we entered the studio with renewed focus. Rachel greeted us with a smile, but I could see a hint of concern in her eyes. I've been hearing some feedback from the community about our piece, and while most of it is positive, there's a sense that some people don't understand where we're headed with it. Betty exchanged a worried glance with me. What do you mean? She asked. Well, there's a notion that our piece is too abstract, that it lacks a clear narrative, Rachel explained. I believe in what we're creating, but we may need to clarify our vision in the next few rehearsals. I felt a knot form in my stomach. How do we do that without losing what we've built? Rachel leaned back, thoughtful. Let's start with a discussion. I want to hear your thoughts and see if we can integrate more of a storyline without sacrificing the emotion we've captured. As we brainstormed, I felt a shift in the atmosphere. Betty seemed uncertain, and I could sense the weight of expectation settling on her shoulders. I reached out, reassuringly squeezing her hand beneath the table. After the meeting, Betty turned to me, her expression conflicted. Do you think we can clarify the narrative without losing our authenticity? I pondered her question, aware of the delicate balance we needed to maintain. I believe we can. Let's take some time to reflect on our journey and see how it can shape the piece. We can infuse our experiences and emotions into the story. With that, we dedicated ourselves to the process. Over the next few rehearsals, we delved deep into our personal narratives, using our shared experiences to create a clearer storyline that still embodied the essence of our dance. But as the pressure mounted, I noticed Betty pulling away, her energy waning. She spent late nights working on her other commitments, and I could see the strain in her eyes. I knew we had to address this before it became overwhelming. One evening, after a long day, I found her staring blankly at her laptop, papers strewn around her. Betty, can we talk? I asked gently. Yeah, of course, she replied, rubbing her temples. I'm just trying to catch up on everything. Is everything okay? You seem distant, I said, concern creeping into my voice. She sighed, looking up at me. I'm just feeling so pulled in different directions. Between work, family, and the piece, it feels like I'm barely keeping my head above water. I'm afraid I'm letting you down. I sat down next to her, taking her hand. You're not letting me down. You're human, and it's okay to feel overwhelmed. We're in this together, remember? You don't have to carry it all alone. Tears welled in her eyes, and I could see the weight of her emotions crashing down. I'm scared, Andrew. What if I can't handle it? What if everything falls apart? Then we'll figure it out together, I reassured her, my voice steady. You don't have to face this alone. We can take a step back from everything and focus on what truly matters, our connection and our art. Quote. As the words sank in, Bet's expression softened. I just want to make sure we're creating something meaningful. We are, I replied, pulling her closer. And we'll keep creating together. Let's prioritize what's important and take it one step at a time. With that conversation, we made a pact to support each other, allowing space to breathe and recharge amidst the chaos. We agreed to focus on our artistry and our relationship, setting aside external pressures to ensure we were both on the same page. As we entered the studio for our next rehearsal, I could feel the change in the air. The tension that had hung over us had begun to lift, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. Rachel greeted us with an encouraging smile, and we dove back into our creative process, infusing our revised narrative with authenticity. As we danced, I felt the bond between us grow stronger, our movements reflecting the unity we had forged through our challenges. The piece began to take shape, intertwining our personal stories with the emotions we had explored. It felt like a tapestry woven from our journey, an authentic reflection of who we were as dancers and as partners. As we rehearsed, I watched Betty bloom, her confidence returning with each movement. She radiated joy, and I knew we had made the right choice in prioritizing our connection. But as we neared the performance date, I couldn't shake the feeling that there were still unresolved tensions lurking beneath the surface. As the opening night approached, I could sense the anticipation and the fear building within Betty. That night, as we prepared for bed, I turned to her. "Are you feeling okay about the performance? I know it's been a lot." She looked at me, her expression a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "I am, but I'm also terrified. I want it to be perfect, and I don't want to disappoint anyone." I took her hands, looking her in the eye. "You won't disappoint anyone, least of all me. Remember, we're here to share our truth. No matter what happens, we've already created something beautiful together." Quote. Betty nodded, her expression softening. "You're right. I just need to let go of the fear and trust in our connection." "Exactly," I said, feeling a wave of relief. "We've come so far, and I know we can do this together." As we drifted off to sleep, I felt a sense of calm settle over us. The journey had been filled with challenges, but it had also brought us closer than ever. We had faced our fears and emerged stronger, ready to take on the world together. The next day, as we arrived at the theater for our performance, I felt the adrenaline rush through my veins. This was our moment, a culmination of our hard work, dedication, and love for one another. We were about to share our truth with the world, and no matter the outcome, I knew we would dance through it together. The atmosphere in the theater was electric, a buzz of anticipation that thrummed in my chest as we prepared for our performance. The lights dimmed, and the soft murmur of the audience faded into silence. Backstage, I could feel Bet's nervous energy mingling with my own. "Are you ready?" I asked, squeezing her hand tightly. She took a deep breath, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. "I think so. I want to make sure we tell our story." "We will," I assured her, trying to infuse my voice with confidence. "We've worked too hard to let fear take over now. Let's focus on the connection we've built." As the stage manager called us to places, I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me. The world outside faded away, and all that mattered was the moment we were about to create together. When the curtain lifted, the spotlight hit us, and I could see the audience, a sea of expectant faces. I took a moment to absorb the energy before stepping forward, Betty beside me, our movements synchronized. The music began, soft and haunting, enveloping us in its embrace. As we launched into the choreography, I could feel the connection between us pulsate like a living entity. Each step flowed seamlessly into the next, our bodies communicating in a language that transcended words. Midway through the piece, we reached the section where we had incorporated our personal narratives. I felt Bet's energy shift as we moved into the vulnerable part of the choreography, each movement a reflection of our struggles, our fears, and our triumphs. I caught her gaze, and in that moment, everything else faded away. It was just the two of us, sharing our truth with the world. I could see the emotions flickering in her eyes, joy, fear, and determination, and I knew we were creating something profound. But then, as we transitioned into a more intense section, I sensed a shift in the audience. A few coughs broke the silence, and I could see heads turning, whispers floating through the air. The energy that had been electric now felt tense, and I worried that we were losing them. "Stay focused," I whispered to Betty as we moved, trying to mask my concern. "We're in this together." We pushed through, channeling our connection into the dance, but the doubt began to creep in. I could see Bet's expression change, her confidence wavering as she sensed the audience's response. In a pivotal moment, I felt her falter, and instinctively, I pulled her into a spin, trying to guide her back into the flow. The music swelled, and I could see the audience's reactions becoming mixed. Some were captivated, while others seemed bewildered. As we reached the final moments of the performance, I could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on us. I glanced at Betty, her eyes wide with fear. "Trust yourself," I urged softly. "We've worked too hard to let this moment slip away." With one last surge of determination, we launched into the finale, pouring every ounce of our emotion into the movements. We connected deeply, channeling our love, our fears, and everything we had created together. In the final pose, we stood facing the audience, hands intertwined, our bodies trembling from the exertion. The silence felt heavy, almost palpable, and I could see the audience grappling with their own emotions. And then, like a dam bursting, the applause erupted. It was loud, a wave of appreciation that washed over us. Bet's eyes widened in disbelief as the audience responded to our vulnerability, and I felt a rush of relief flood through me. We took our bows, the energy in the theater shifting as people rose to their feet. As we stepped off the stage, we were enveloped by our friends, their faces lit up with excitement. "You were incredible," one of our fellow dancers exclaimed, hugging us both tightly. The emotion was palpable. Bet's expression was a mix of disbelief and joy. "Really? You think so?" "Absolutely. You both took risks, and it paid off," Rachel chimed in, beaming with pride. The audience was deeply moved. "You told a beautiful story." As the night continued, we celebrated with our friends, laughter and joy filling the air. But amidst the festivities, I could see a flicker of concern in Bet's eyes. Later, as the crowd began to disperse and we found a quiet corner, I turned to her. "How are you feeling about everything? You were amazing out there." She sighed, her expression thoughtful. "I loved the performance, but I could sense the audience's confusion. I'm worried they didn't fully understand what we were trying to convey." I took her hands in mine, feeling the warmth of her energy. "But they responded. They felt something, and that's what matters. Art is subjective, and sometimes it takes time for people to process what they've experienced." Betty nodded slowly, her expression softening. "You're right, I just want our work to resonate with others. And it will," I assured her. "We've created something beautiful together, and that's worth celebrating. Let's not lose sight of that." As the night wore on, I could see Betty relaxing, the weight of her worries beginning to lift. We shared stories, laughter, and the thrill of having taken a bold step into the unknown. But beneath the surface, I could sense an undercurrent of tension. The success of the performance was bittersweet. I knew that as we continued on this journey, we would face more challenges. Later that night, as we walked home hand in hand, I felt a sense of hope mingling with uncertainty. The performance had marked a turning point for us, and while the future was unpredictable, I was confident that we would navigate it together, supporting, inspiring, and challenging each other every step of the way. And as we settled into bed, I realized that our journey was just beginning. Whatever lay ahead, I knew we had the strength to face it together. The night of our performance felt electric. As we moved through the choreography, I sensed the audience connect with our story. Each gesture, each expression resonated deeply, transforming confusion into appreciation. After the show, the backstage atmosphere buzzed with excitement. "You were amazing," our friends exclaimed, pulling us into hugs. Bet's joy was palpable, her earlier doubts fading. But as the days passed, I noticed a lingering anxiety in her. One evening, I found her deep in thought. "What if we can't live up to this again?" she confessed, fear shadowing her eyes. I took her hands, grounding her. "Betty, every artist faces that fear. Let's focus on what we can create next, not what's already happened." We dove into brainstorming for our next project, invigorated by the excitement of creation. Yet, I could see moments of self-doubt creeping in, especially during rehearsals. One night, I found her alone in the studio, staring into the mirror. "I feel like I'm struggling," she admitted. "It's okay to feel that way," I reassured her. "Let's enjoy the process and not chase perfection." With renewed determination, we made a pact to support each other and embrace the uncertainty of our artistic journey. As we prepared for our next performance, I felt hopeful. Together, we would face whatever challenges lay ahead, united in our art and our love.